right. What we have here is the Samsung S23 Ultra. And this is the black version. This is the Snapdragon version, 12 gigabytes with 1 terabyte of storage. It's a real beauty, a black beauty. But is it as good as its predecessor, the S22 Ultra? I have here the S22 Ultra with the Samsung chipset, not the Snapdragon. And I wanted to test if these two phones are actually a good match. Is the camera system really that much better? Let's find out.
Anyway, let's see what is so special about this image. Let's zoom in a little bit to see what we working with here. So the S22 Ultra on the left, the S23 Ultra on the right. Immediately we can see that the S22 Ultra, sorry, the newer one, is a little bit more lighter. The S22 Ultra, however, the midtones right here are correctly exposed, although the blacks are a little bit crushed. The S23, however, the midtones appear a little bit lighter. And if we have a histogram, we can see that the midtones appear at the very center of the image, or at least it appears to be the center of the image. I think this is the center, so it's a little bit underexposed. But this histogram is the way it should be exposed. Okay, so there's the ultra-wide cameras. Let's get a few other examples. Let's get these two, for example. So, straight out the bat, what is to me apparent is that the S23 Ultra is a little bit more washed out. The S22 Ultra is a little bit more colorful, but also a little bit more magenta, meaning a little bit more red, pinkish in the black areas. Especially right here in the darker areas, you can see the pink magenta hue coming into darks. While here it is, I think correctly exposed, although it should not be as green as it is here. It should be black. The paint on these tiles is black. All right, let's do another example. My lovely assistant. Let's look what we can figure out here. Okay, so the S22 Ultra on the left, the S23 Ultra on the right. Straight out the bat, the S23 Ultra did a good job balancing the colors. I don't know what happened with the S22 Ultra. It's a little bit too heavy on the colors. I think I have a color profile that is still active. Let's move on. Let's see what else I can show you guys that is apparent. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on. We have a nice flower shot with the main camera. So the S22 Ultra, let's see if this is correct. Yes, the S22 Ultra on the left, the S23 on the right. Let's look at some details. Let's pixel peep a little. Very similar, except for the S23 Ultra is a little bit lesser exposed, and the S22 Ultra is correctly exposed. All right, let's go to a street. Let's get a simple street. Okay, first street. Let's see which one is which. Okay, the S22 on the left, S23 on the right. Let's zoom in a little and see what we can figure out. They look pretty similar, but Let's zoom in a little bit more and see what we can figure out. Which one is a keeper? So I'm looking right now at details, over sharpening effects, trying to see which one is better. So here's what is apparent. The focus on the S22 Ultra is here on the lamppost, and the focus is here on the background. So it's not really a fair comparison. But they look pretty similar, although the S23 Ultra, when you look at the foliage, it is trying to bump up the exposure. Maybe not by much, but it is noticeable. And let me see the histogram here. Yeah, definitely we can see that the shadow areas here are not the same as the shadow areas on this side. Anyway, let's go into more pictures. Let's say this one and this one. All right. Info. The S22 on the right and the S23 Ultra on the left. Right. Let's see what we can figure out. Again, I feel that the S22 Ultra has done a correct exposure on the scene, even on the person. It does use a little bit different artifact system, over sharpening system. You can see it here, this weird oil painting. While on the S23 Ultra, it appears much more natural looking. Especially when we go here into these further away trees, you can definitely see the way that the S22 Ultra main camera over sharpens foliage. And I think this is only apparent when there's like a scene with a lot of details, with a lot of texture. I think the phone is trying to balance the file size to a moderate file size by doing more compression when there is more detail in a picture, opposed to when there is a flat image with very less details, like a portrait, for example, mostly skin. The file size is not a big concern for the phone, therefore it does not over sharpen. But here, because we have a lot of details going on, it's a city capture. Yeah, it tends to create this little bit more over sharpened effect in the foliage. What else? What can we see in this image? I can definitely see that the hue is a little bit shifted on the S23 Ultra. And it's not shifted in the right way. I can tell you, this is the correct color. And this is more magenta-ish. There's much more red in this picture. Let's see a different picture where things are more apparent. Maybe this bicycle shot right here. There we go. What can we see about this bicycle picture? Okay, so the S23 Ultra again exposes more to the right, and we can see that it's more higher exposed, which is not always a good thing. Let's zoom in a little and see how they did with sharpening and artifacts. So straight out the bat, they both did a pretty good job. The S22 Ultra sadly still crushes the highlights a little bit more, but because this is an ultra wide picture, we saw that it has a tendency to crush the blacks a little bit with the ultra wide. But it is, however, correctly exposed. The buildings here, the bridge, this is the correct exposure, the way it should be, the way it naturally looks to me, to the eye. The S23 Ultra it has exposed more to the highlights, and it appears more washed out to me. Okay, here's another one. This time again, back to the normal positions, the S22 Ultra on the left, the S23 on the right. What we can see is definitely a lot of over processing in the image. The HDR here in the S23 Ultra is definitely way more aggressive, giving a very flat, unnatural tone to the images. And again here, the bicycle bridge is overexposed. To me, this looks like sand from the Sahara, and to me here, on this side, it looks like the proper exposure. Zooming out, we can definitely see the difference of HDR over processing too much on the S23 Ultra. So keep in mind, this is the latest firmware of July 2024. Maybe somebody fixed it with the October or November update, but I have not yet come across an article on the internet where this issue has been fixed on the S23 Ultra, where it overexposes an image. Let's see, this is the 3x ultra wide, I believe, because of the F number here. And sharpness wise, the foliage looks more natural on the S23 Ultra, but I will still not buy this image because of the horrible color science. Looking at it straight off the bat, I really dislike the S23 Ultra. It is too washed out, it's too hot, too bright, and maybe the S22 Ultra is a little bit crushing the blacks and a little bit over processing the foliage, but I would still prefer this image over that image because it's way more natural, way less aggressive in processing, and more pleasing to the eye than this one. This one is like white balance is all wrong, more to the bluish colors. Let's move on. Let's get another example. Let's try these pictures. So this is again a 3x zoom, I believe. And let's see what we can find zooming in. So by default, because of the newer sensors, the S23 Ultra, of course, will have more sharpness. But the white balance is just all off. Just not naturally looking. Then I have a few zoom shots. Let's do a few zoom shots. So the S22 Ultra on the left and the S23 Ultra on the right. Zooming in, one big mess from the S23 Ultra. It's not even fair anymore. Look how bad this is. Look how bad this is. Overexposed and the wrong white balance. Let's do some portraits. Okay, so I have some portraits. Let's do the first portrait set. Okay. Beautiful day in July. There's no reason why this phone should have a very low shutter speed. No reason at all. But let's look at the shutter speed. 1/100. Why? This one, 1/50. Why? I mean, 1/100, sure, I can relate. I can understand. Especially if you have image stabilization. iOS, but 1/50, and then no image stabilization, it will lead into a blurry mess. Not only that, again, we can see that the S23 Ultra blows out the image and color science is all wrong. Another example of a portrait. Again, it tries to do a portrait with a very low shutter speed, 1/50. And I don't understand why 1/50 when you have a 3 times optical zoom lens. Zooming in on the person, we can hardly do a good comparison because yeah, one is just very blurred. It's a camera shake that is not comparable to a phone that is older and does a considerably better job than the newer phone. Then again, let's just not even talk about the blown highlights. Curious though what the histogram is going to show, because we have the highlights here and they're clearly clipped off here, but there's hardly any information in the blacks. Here on the S22 Ultra, the older phone, there is a lot of information. All of these blacks, dark areas, they're all here accumulated. Here, there's hardly any blacks. They're all shifted to the middle. Let's do another portrait. Although I can see how this image appears to be more correct, I prefer the colors on this image. But then keep in mind, there's probably a filter applied here that is very low. You can adjust the filter on the Samsungs by pressing from 0 to 10. And I think this one was a 2 or a 3 strength for warm filter. But apart from the color science in this picture, I think the S23 Ultra finally did a good enough job, but I would not approve a blown highlight like this, especially when the older phone is quite more capable of adjusting the highlights on the arm much better. What happened, Samsung? What did you do? Why are you overexposing images like this? Another comparison. Yeah, we can definitely see that it tries to overexpose images, highlights, clipping right there. This should not be this bright. And I don't know what is happening. To me, these steps, these buildings right here, they have the right gray exposure, the right 50% gray exposure. And here they are either washed out or a little bit overexposed. And I am not buying that image from the S23 Ultra. Let's do what is this, an ultra wide? Hold on, this is the main camera, but now we're shooting against the sunlight. What can we see? So apart from the fact that it's trying to blow out the image a little bit, overexposes it a little bit. Yeah, there is just something off on the S23 Ultra's images. I way much more prefer the older look with a little bit more clipping, dark colors than the S23 Ultra trying to not clip the darker areas, but then clip as a result the highlights.
Let's see, what else can we do? Now we also have some selfies. Don't know which one exactly was the right image where I was able to see it. One thing I can definitely tell on the S23 Ultra is that it just over processes quite a bit. The second thing that I noticed on the S23 Ultra is that it has lesser sharpness than the older S22 Ultra. If I look at my individual hairs on my beard, I can tell you that the hairs on my beard here on the S22 Ultra are much more finer and sharper, and they are much more blurrier on the S23 Ultra. Now, I don't know how that came to be, but they did switch out the front-facing selfie camera for a different sensor. We have a 9 megapixel on the S22 Ultra, but because it's 16 by 9, it's 9 megapixel, but actually it's 10 megapixel, right? But the S23 Ultra switched out to a 12 megapixel camera, and it is still worse than the older 10 megapixel camera. Maybe if we just align the two beards. Let's see. Let's see if we can just align them. You can clearly see that the S22 Ultra is sharper. I think most of these selfies, they look pretty close alike, apart from the sharpness being a little bit softer and every now and then a little bit ultra processed. Other than that, they're pretty much the same, I can assure you. Color profile appears to be the same. Okay, let's see these two images. Okay, so the S23 Ultra is now on the right again. And I don't know what is happening, but the color is much more pinkish. The white balance is just slightly off here, and it's noticeable. It's noticeable. This is the correct exposure and the correct white balance. And I have the feeling that the S23 Ultra is just over processing something, just trying to do a super HDR, and it's just falling on its ass doing that. Right way. So the S22 Ultra now is on the right side. And let's zoom in a little. So this is taken with, I believe that this must be 3 times optical zoom. Although sharper, because clearly if we look at the foliage on the older S22 Ultra here and the newer S23 Ultra here, the foliage processing of sharpness and noise reduction is much better right here. Well, and yeah, so you do see an effect where the newer phone has improved over the older phone, but then they just fucked it up. I'm sorry about my language, but they did. They shifted the exposure way too much to the right. So how about I just shut up and let you guys watch these images. So there you have it, guys. This was a short overview of a lot of comparison pictures between the Samsung S22 Ultra and the Samsung S23 Ultra, captured in July 2024. I hope you guys enjoyed what I showed you, and I hope you learned something about this comparison. I hope you will write me in the comments. Maybe you have some suggestions, maybe you have some ideas for me. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye-bye.